Game Informer just put out a 12-page article written by Wesley LeBlanc. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And there's a ton of new information here. I will leave a link to the article down below, but of course I'm going to go over it all in today's video. As always, there will be chapter markers below, but do note that the final chapter of this video is very, very, very long, and it's also very story focused, but you don't have to worry about spoilers until that section. Let's start right off with some information on how the world will work in this game and how we will navigate the world. So BioWare says that the Veilguard is not an open world, even though some of its explorable areas might feel like one. What we have here is a hub and spoke-like design where the needs of the story are served by the level design. We should be expecting a network of teleporting Illuvians, and this is how players will travel. So you'll basically go from Illuvian to Illuvian, bringing you to different parts of northern Thedas. Now, as of now, it seems like very few, if any, of the locations in the game will be seamlessly connected. BioWare says that this will allow us to go from places such as the magical capital city of Minrathous, to tropical beaches, to the Arlathan forest, to grim and gothic areas, and elsewhere. It is said that some of these areas will be larger and full of secrets and treasures, while others are smaller and more focused on linear storytelling. The Arlathan Forest, which we did get to see in the gameplay reveal, is one of these more linear, smaller areas, but BioWare says that there are still going to be optional paths that you can take and offshoots to explore for loot, potions, and other things. Each location will get its own mini-map, and the larger locations in the game will actually feature Fog of War on the map, meaning that the map will be hidden until you actually discover the new areas, but the more linear, smaller levels will not have that Fog of War feature. BioWare also says that this game has the largest number of diverse biomes in the series' history. Moving on to the character creator, and some of this we did already know, but not all of it. There are 4 races to choose from: elves, Kunari, humans, and dwarves, and Wesley says hundreds of options to customize your character beyond that. You get to choose pronouns, gender, and adjust physical characteristics such as height, shoulder width, chest size, glute and bulge size, hip width, the bloodshotness of your eyes, the crookedness of your nose, and much more. Wesley says there must be hundreds of sliders to customize body proportions and features like skin hue, tone, melanin, and just about anything else. There's also nudity in this game, which you can experience in the character creator itself, but I'm assuming that it will be like in BG3 where you have an option to disable it when the game first starts up. You also, of course, get to choose your character's backstory, which seems to be your faction choice in this game, and this choice, of course, affects faction allegiance, in-game dialogue, and reputation standing. The 6 factions to choose from include the Grey Wardens, the Shadow Dragons, the Mornwatch, the Lords of Fortune, the Antivan Crows, and the Veil Jumpers. You do get to pick your first and last name, and there appears to be 4 different voices that you can choose from, which also do come with pitch sliders for each of them. Some of these will, of course, create quite the discussion, but there's no doubt here that the character creator seems to be really extensive and in-depth. It would be really cool if they were able to release it early like Capcom did with Dragon's Dogma 2. So our character in this game, the player character, unlike in Inquisition where you play as the Inquisitor, a Destiny has chosen you type character. In the Veilguard, Rook, or whatever name you choose, is said to be the main character on this quest because of competency. So Rook seems to be able to do something about the current ongoings, and you, the player character Rook, know that you can do something, and therefore you choose to do something, versus, let's say, being some character that's chosen by the Divine. Now let's go over what happens when you press start in this game. So the start or pause screen in Veilguard contains your map, journal, character sheets, skill trees, and a library for lore information. We are told that we can cross-compare equipment and equip new gear for Rook and your companions, build weapon loadouts for quick change-ups mid-combat, and customize you and your party's abilities and builds via an easy-to-understand skill tree. For example, you may unlock a trait that increases damage by 25% against armor. Pretty simple. Passive abilities are said to unlock jump attacks and guarantee critical hit opportunities, while abilities add moves like Wall of Fire if you're a mage. Skill trees are special to each class, and the further that you progress in a skill tree, the closer you get to unlocking specializations, of which there's 3 specializations per class, complete with a unique ultimate ability. I'm actually going to have a separate video out in the next day or so, taking a deeper look at the classes and skill trees, so be on the lookout. And this is a good time to transition into talking about combat. And as most of you should already be aware, this game does feature an action combat system, but it also offers you the ability to enter into a combat wheel or do a tactical pause if you so choose. There is a dash, a parry, the ability to charge moves, and a revamped healing system that allows you to use potions using the D-pad if you're on controller. You can, of course, combo attacks, but we also learned that you can even bookmark combos with a quick dash, which basically allows for the combo to finish after the dash is complete. At least that's the way that I'm understanding it here. Certainly have to wait to see that in action. Do note that you can use your abilities in real time. You don't need to do a tactical pause, but abilities will have cooldowns. Wesley reports that in the tactical pause, you can actually choose abilities and then queue them up, and then strategize with synergies and combos, all while targeting specific opponents. And when you let go of the combat wheel in the tactical pause, your selection will then play out. We also learned that although all classes will have light and heavy attacks, all classes will use abilities with the same buttons and interact with the combat wheel in the same way, there's still some unique aspects to each class outside of the abilities. So sword and board warriors will be able to throw their shields. A mage will be able to throw out magical attacks, of course. A warrior can parry incoming attacks, which can stagger opponents. A rogue can also parry, but the rogue class actually gets a larger window to execute the parry. And although mages can't parry, they can throw up a shield that blocks incoming damage so long as you have the mana to sustain it. Also note that although you cannot play as the companions, or switch to them, should I say, like you could do in previous Dragon Age games, in the combat wheel you can choose your companion's attacks and abilities, and I think there's even a way to direct them. We just haven't seen anything in that regards yet. I went over more combat in my previous gameplay details video. I'll leave a link to that below. All right, now it's time to talk about story, and believe me, there's a lot to discuss here, but some of this might actually be spoilers for some of you guys, as we basically get to follow the journey of a character from before what we saw in the gameplay reveal, a little bit before, all the way past the gameplay reveal, like maybe like a quest or two, I guess you could say. There's some pretty big story drops here, but it all does take place very, very early on in the game, so it's up to you if you want to keep listening. Let me start off with a little bit of context here from pre-Dragon Age, the Veilguard. So Solas is an elven god, and long ago he created the Veil, which is a magical barrier between the Fade, which is like a place of dreams, gods, and spirits, and the material world of Thedas. He basically did this because the elven gods at the time were power-hungry and ruthless, and the elves as a whole actually became slaves under these elven gods. The Veil acts as a barrier to seal away these gods from the material world, and Solas thought that by creating it he would save his elven people. Unfortunately, it didn't quite work out that way, and the elves lost their immortality, lost some of their magical power, and in time they basically ended up as slaves again, at the very best outcasts on Thedas. Well, Solas now wants to destroy the Veil that he created in an attempt to restore his people to their former power. But destroying the Veil would also cause a lot of death and destruction. Maybe think of it like a nuclear bomb going off, but with added demons running around. Now, Solas' decision to do this is why some players may view him as like a terrorist of sorts, while other players may fully empathize with him, and of course there's people in different areas of that spectrum. The debates on this can certainly be intense. So we, the players, and our companions make up the Veilguard, and we are the ones attempting to stop Solas at the start of this game. But now I'm going to talk about some new story information that we got from the Game Informer article, as Wesley got to witness gameplay from beyond what we saw in the gameplay reveal. And the gameplay reveal ended in the Arlathan forest with Rook, the player character, Harding, Varric, and Nev attempting to stop Solas' ritual to tear down the Veil. A spoiler warning once again. So Wesley says that the ritual is stopped in the game that he was watching, probably everybody's game in this case. At least it stopped temporarily, and the player character passes out to wake up moments later in a dreamlike landscape, hearing the voice of Solas. Solas explains to Rook, the player character, that a few drops of blood from Rook interacted with the ritual, connecting them to the Fade forever. It actually seems like you, the player, and Solas will be speaking to each other through the Fade itself. Maybe perhaps when you rest, I'm not entirely sure. Solas also informs the player character that he was attempting to move two of the old elven gods, which we do see these two mysterious beings in the trailer on each side of Solas, to a new prison because the previously constructed prison was apparently failing now. But now Solas is trapped in the Fade because of us, and these two gods are now free. We do get confirmation here that these are in fact the old blighted elven gods, and it's Elgarnan, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing these correctly, and Gillanane. I'll touch up on my pronunciation and touch up on the lore and explain the lore in a future video. So welcome to our new objective, stopping these two old ancient elven gods. And this is quite the change up right there in the story, because the focus before we thought was just stopping Solas, but now it seems to be more away from Solas and on these two gods that are now roaming Thedas free. I would assume though that the Solas problem is only, stopped temporarily for now, and at some point we're going to have to resume that quest depending on what Solas does. But I think it may be possible that we may actually have the chance to maybe persuade Solas to do something different. I think it's even possible that Solas may be advising us in our mission to stop these two evil gods. Like, we might be teaming up with him once again. After that, the player character wakes up in the lighthouse, which I will talk about more here shortly. But first, we got some information on what takes place before the footage in the gameplay reveal. So apparently we start off in a bar in Minrathous, and Minrathous is the capital city of the Tevinter Imperium. And in this bar, Rook, the player character, and Varric, who first appeared in Dragon Age 2, are looking for a detective mage named Nev Gallus, who is a future companion. The first thing that the player gets to do is make a dialogue choice, and then a tavern brawl ends up taking place, which lets you, the player, get a feel for Rook's capabilities. In one of the dialogues, Wesley says that a tone wheel is presented with a friendly response, a snarky response, and a rough and tough response, but the devs also told Wesley that there is a more emotional type response that is more romantically inclined. We are told that there will be plenty of romantic and platonic relationship building dialogue options in this game, but ultimately it's up to you, the player, when or if you choose to engage with those. We are reminded though that if you do give the cold shoulder to your companions, this may cause some of them to seek the embrace of others. And this scene eventually leads into the start of the gameplay reveal, which we don't need to go over all of that again. Wesley did give us a bit of new information here though regarding the gameplay, as we're told that playing as a Qunari, the camera will adjust really nicely to your height, and Qunnaris tend to be very tall, and this game really gives that feeling of towering over others. Now on the other end of that, when playing as a dwarf, for example, it's said that the camera will attempt to give you that perspective, and it'll give off the feeling that you are in fact shorter than many of the other characters and races. But touching back on the lighthouse, which is where our character is now waking up in after having that conversation with Solas, we are already aware that the lighthouse is meant to serve as like a headquarters, essentially, something akin to Skywatch from Inquisition, a place where you can advance dialogue with companions, romance, and prepare for quests. Well, we have now learned that the lighthouse is actually the lair of the dreadwolf himself, Solas. Solas is the dreadwolf, and it's located in the Fade. It's this towering structure centered amongst floating islands. It has an elvish feel to it with greenery hanging from above, and there's hues of purple and touches of gold all around. You will see plenty of little things in the lighthouse that give you more insight to how Solas lived here when he was here. We once again get confirmation that as the game progresses, the lighthouse will become more functional and also become more like a home. Now, the interesting bit of new information here is that since the lighthouse is in the Fade, a place of dreams, it actually responds to your world state and emotion. So depending on what's going on in your game at a particular time, expect changes in, I would say, maybe the vibe that the lighthouse gives. It's at this part that Wesley noticed a clock symbol over a dialogue icon, I believe above Nev's head, and we learned that this actually represents optional dialogue in the game. Now, there will be a dining hall in the lighthouse and a library, and the library area is actually said to be the center of the lighthouse, where everyone regroups before heading off. In the lighthouse, in this gameplay presentation, the player and the rest of the team decide that they must go back to the ritual site in the Arlathan forest. Bioware says that in this particular lighthouse dialogue, there's actually unique dialogue that can play out here if the player character is playing as an elf. And the same goes for faction choice, as the character is currently part of the Lords of Fortune, but if they were playing as the Shadow Dragons, they would end up getting unique dialogue here when interacting with Nev, as Nev is part of that faction. It's even said that Nev will recognize you if you're a Shadow Dragon. I'm not sure if that means actually recognize you as a person or just recognize, that you're part of the same faction. The group then heads through Solas's Alluvion, which is a teleport of sorts, but it's not fully functional without Solas, and the group ends up in a different part of the forest away from the ritual site. The group is then attacked by demon-infested suits of armor known as Sentinels, but they are saved by two new NPCs that we've not been given any info on yet unless you have read the comics. Strife and Ireland, or Ireland, I don't know how to pronounce these names. These two NPCs ask for our help in finding a character named Balara Lutara, who we know is actually one of the companions. Wesley says that BioWare is not shying away from minutes-long cutscenes, as this scene is quite long, and that the game up to this point feels like a long, good fantasy novel. We do learn in this part of the article that there will actually be special relationship meters on each companion's character screen. We did see approval going up and down in the gameplay reveal, but we didn't know where or how, or even if this would be represented at all, but now we do. Wesley then reports that the team progresses through the forest on a mission called Entropy Grasp, and Balara is eventually found. Now, Balara is this bubbly, witty, and charming character, and she's part of the Veil Jumper faction. She is said to be the face of her faction, which is actually said to be the same for the other companions, as they are the face of their respective factions. And Balara is dressed more like an academic versus being a combat expert. We do learn that Balara's arm gauntlet is actually useful for both tinkering with the environment and combat alike. She's a mage that specializes in electricity, but she can also use healing magic. For this section of the game, a new save is loaded with a different character, and now BioWare is playing as a human mage with the Veil Jumper faction, and this did end up yielding some unique dialogue between the player character and Balara, as they're part of the same faction. Balara ends up explaining that you are all trapped in a Veil bubble. As the group navigates through the Arlathan forest, they encounter plenty of darkspawn. This is interesting to take note of because there is no entrance into the deep roads nearby. So the darkspawn seem to be traveling quite far, and unusually far. We do have to keep in mind though that there are two blighted elven gods that are now roaming the world. Although an official or more traditional blight is not yet confirmed for the game, as a blight usually requires darkspawn finding an old god and turning it into an archdemon to lead the blight, there's still some sort of blight going on here. In the article, Wesley even says, with the blighted elven gods roaming the world, and thanks to Blight's radiation-like spread, it's a much bigger threat in Veilguard than in any Dragon Age before it. End quote. Those of you who played Origins would of course know that Origins takes place during the 5th Blight. Although the Arlathan Forest can be quite a bright, colorful, whimsical type place, kind of fable-ish, I guess you could say, BioWare does say that the Arlathan's whimsy will starkly contrast to other areas in the game and that there will be some grim locations. Now, eventually, Balara spots a floating fortress, and she thinks that an artifact is up in this fortress that they need to destroy the Veil bubble that they are trapped in, so they need to head up into that fortress. Now, to reach this fortress though, there's these floating rock rings that need to be destroyed, and apparently Balara's arm gauntlet can do that for us. Wesley learned here that you, the player character, can also acquire unique abilities like Balara has with this Tinkerer on her arm. So in the future, if a situation comes up where you need something, maybe you don't have Balara in your group, but there should be a different way to solve that environmental problem. As each ring is activated, enemies end up appearing, demons and darkspawn alike, and when the group finally reaches the center of the fortress, they find the artifact known as Nadas Durthalin. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but then an ogre boss ends up appearing. After they defeat the boss, Balara uses a special crystal to power this artifact. The artifact comes alive as an archive spirit, but then the crystal breaks and you end up not learning much about whatever this spirit was. Balara does believe that she can fix this device though, which I'm assuming will become a quest for later on. And this is when the group then heads to the Veil Jumper camp, and this is actually the end of the gameplay that was shown to Game Informer. A lot of story drops right there, a lot of lore information. There's a lot to talk about. Some people probably will think that BioWare gave away way too much information here, but it is all early on in the game. So Wesley's overall opinion on everything was very positive, and even went as far as saying, but with the proper acknowledgement that I reserve additional judgment until I actually play the game, I'm surprised that Veilguard might just be the RPG I'm looking forward to most this year. So take that as you will. And thank you all so much for watching. Much more Dragon Age content to come, including a lore series. I'm really excited to delve into the lore myself and then share that with you all with some relaxing fireside vibe type videos. Feel free to join the Discord server, link below. A lot of Dragon Age discussion going on over there. I'll catch you on the next one.